hey, I love to read books, but the old school way is just so inconvenient, lugging this around on the bus, trying to read it at work. It's gotta be a better way. It's the 21st century. Oh, do I got a good audio story for you today. Check it out.
Chapter 7 of The Man Upstairs. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Mike Harris. The Man Upstairs by P.G.Wodehouse. Chapter 7. The Man Who Disliked Cats. It was Harold who first made us acquainted when I was dining one night at the Café Britannique in Soho. It is a peculiarity of the Café Britannique that you always find flies there, even in the winter. Snow was falling that night as I turned in at the door, but glancing about me I noticed several of the old faces. My old acquaintance, Percy the Bluebottle, looking wonderfully fit despite his years, was doing deep breathing exercises on a mutton cutlet, and was too busy to do more than pause for a moment to nod at me. But his cousin Harold, always active, sighted me and bustled up to do the honors. He'd finished his game of touch last with my right ear, and was circling slowly in the air while he thought out other ways of entertaining me, when there was a rush of air, a swish of napkin, and no more Harold. I turned to thank my preserver, whose table adjoined mine. He was a Frenchman, a melancholy-looking man. He had the appearance of one who was searching for the leak in life's gas pipe with a lighted candle, of one whom the clenched fist of fate had smitten beneath the temperamental third waistcoat button. He waved my thanks aside. "It was a bagatelle," he said. He became friendly. He moved to my table, and we fraternized over our coffee. Suddenly he became agitated. He kicked at something on the floor. His eyes gleamed angrily. "Psst!" he hissed. "Va-t'en!" I looked around the corner of the table and perceived the restaurant cat in dignified retreat. "You do not like cats?" I said. "I hate all animals, monsieur. Cats especially." He frowned. He seemed to hesitate. "I will tell you my story," he said. "You will sympathize. You have a sympathetic face. It is the story of a man's tragedy. It is the story of a blighted life. It is the story of a woman who would not forgive. It is the story of... Excuse me, I've got an appointment at 11, I said. He nodded absently, drew at his cigarette, and began. "I have conceived my hatred of animals, monsieur, many years ago in Paris. Animals are to me a symbol for the lost dreams of youth, for ambitions foiled, for artistic impulses cruelly stifled. You're astonished. You ask why I say these things. I shall tell you. I am in Paris, young, ardent, artistic. I wish to paint pictures. I have the genius, the enthusiasm. I wish to be disciple of the great Bouguereau. But no, I am dependent for support upon an uncle. He is rich. He is proprietor of the great hotel Jules Priault. My name is also Priault. He is not sympathetic. I say, 'Uncle, I have the genius, the enthusiasm. Permit me to paint.' He shakes his head. He says, 'I will give you position in my hotel and you shall earn your living.' What choice? I weep, but I kill my dreams, and I become cashier at my uncle's hotel at a salary of 35 francs a week. I, the artist, become a machine for the changing of money at a damn bad salary. What would you? What choice? I am dependent. I go to the hotel, and there I learn to hate all animals, cats especially. I will tell you the reason. My uncle's hotel is a fashionable hotel. Rich Americans, rich Maharajas, rich people of every nation come to my uncle's hotel. They come, and with them they have brought their pets. Monsieur, it was the existence of a nightmare. Wherever I have looked, there are animals. Listen, there is an Indian prince. He has with him 2 dromedaries. There is also one other Indian prince. With him is a giraffe. The giraffe drink every day 1 dozen best champagne to keep his coat good. I, the artist, have my bock, and my coat is not good. There is a guest with a young lion. There is a guest with an alligator. But especially there is a cat. He is fat. His name is Alexander. He belongs to an American woman. She is fat. She exhibits him to me. He is wrapped in a silk and fur creation like an opera cloak. Every day she exhibits him. It is Alexander this and Alexander that, till I hate Alexander very much. I hate all the animals, but especially Alexander. And so, monsieur, it goes on, day by day. In this hotel there is a zoological garden. And every day I hate the animals the more, but especially Alexander. We artists, monsieur, we are martyrs to our nerves. It became insupportable, this thing. Each day it became more insupportable. At night I dream of all the animals, one by one, the giraffe, the two dromedaries, the young lion, the alligator, and Alexander, especially Alexander. You have heard of men who cannot endure the society of a cat, how they cry out and jump in the air if a cat is among those present, eh? Your Lord Roberts? Precisely, monsieur. I have read so much. Listen, then. I am become by degrees almost like him. I do not cry out and jump in the air when I see the cat Alexander, but I grind my teeth and I hate him. Yes, I am the sleeping volcano, and one morning, monsieur, I have suffered the eruption. It is like this. I shall tell you. Not only at that time am I the martyr to my nerves, but also to toothache. That morning I have had the toothache very bad. I have been in pain the most terrible. I groan as I add the figures in my book. As I groan, I hear a voice. Say good morning to Monsieur Priot, Alexander. Conceive my emotions, monsieur, when this fat, beastly cat is placed before me upon my desk. It puts a cover upon it. No, that is not the phrase. The lid. It put the lid upon it. All my smothered hatred of the animal burst forth. I could no longer conceal my hatred. I rose. I was terrible. I seized him by the trail. I flung him. I did not know where. I did not care. Not then. Afterwards, yes, but not then. Your Longfellow has a poem. I shot an arrow into the air. It fell to earth, I knew not where. And then he has found it, the arrow in the heart of a friend. Am I right? Also was that the tragedy with me. I flung the cat Alexander. My uncle, on whom I am dependent, is passing at the moment. He has received the cat in the middle of his face. My companion, with the artist's instinct for the curtain, paused. He looked round the brightly lit restaurant. From every side rose the clatter of knife and fork, and the clear, sharp note of those who drank soup. In a distant corner, a small waiter with a large voice was calling the cook names through the speaking tube. It was a cheerful scene, but it brought no cheer to my companion. He sighed heavily and resumed. I hurry over that painful scene. There is a blooming row. My uncle is hot-tempered man. The cat is heavy cat. I have thrown him very hard. For my nerves and my toothache and my hatred have given me the giant strength. Alone is this enough to enrage my hot-tempered uncle. I am there in his hotel, you will understand, as cashier, not as cat-thrower. And now, beside all this, I have insulted the valuable patron. She have left the hotel that day. There are no doubts in my mind as to the outcome. With certainty I await my congé. And after painful scene I get it. I am to go at once. He have assured the angry American that I go at once. He has called me into his private office. Jean, he has said to me, at the end of other things, you are a fool, dolt, no good imbecile. I give you good place in my hotel, and you spend your time flinging cats. I will have no more of you. Even now I cannot forget that you are my dear brother's child, though. I will now give you 1,000 francs and never see you again. I have thanked him, for to me it is wealth. Not before have I ever had 1,000 francs of my own. I go out of the hotel, I go to a cafe and order a bock, I smoke a cigarette. It is necessary that I think out plans. Shall I with my 1,000 francs rent a studio in the quarter and commence my life as artist? No. I have still the genius, the enthusiasm, but I have not the training. To train myself to paint pictures I must study long, and even 1,000 francs will not last forever. Then what shall I do? I do not know. I order one other box, smoke more cigarettes, but still I do not know. And then I say to myself, I will go back to my uncle and plead with him. I will seize favorable opportunity. I will approach him after dinner when he is in his good temper, but for that I must be close at hand. I must be, what is your expression, Johnny on the spot. My mind is made up. I have my plan. I have gone back to my uncle's hotel. and have engaged not too expensive bedroom. My uncle does not know. He still is in his private office. I secure my room. I dine cheaply that night, but I go to the theatre and also to supper after the theatre, for have I not my 1,000 francs? It is late when I reach my bedroom. I go to bed. I go to sleep. But I do not sleep long. I am awakened by a voice. It is a voice that says, "Move, and I shoot. Move, and I shoot." I lie still. I do not move. I am courageous, but I am unarmed. And the voice says again, "Move, and I shoot." Is it robbers? Is it some marauder who has made his way to my room to plunder me? I do not know. Perhaps I think yes. "Who are you?" I have asked. There is no answer. I take my courage in my hands. I leap from my bed. I dash for the door. No pistol has been fired. I have reached the passage and have shouted for assistance. Hotel officials run up, doors open. "What is it?" voices cry. "There is in my room an armed robber," I assure them. And then I have found, no, I am mistaken. My door, you will understand, is open. And as I have said these words, a large green parrot comes hopping out. My assassin is nothing but a green parrot. "Move and I shoot," it has said to those gathered in the corridor. It then has bitten me in the hand and passed on. I am chagrined, monsieur, but only for a moment. Then I forget my chagrin, for a voice from a door that has opened says with joy, "It is my Polly which I have this evening lost." I turn. I gasp for admiration. It is a beautiful lady in a pink dressing gown which have spoke these words. She has looked at me. I have looked at her. I forget everything but that she is adorable. I forget those who stand by. I forget that the parrot has bitten me in the hand. I forget even that I am standing there in my pajamas with on my feet nothing. I can only gaze at her and worship. I have found words. "Mademoiselle," I have said, "I am rejoiced that I have been the means of restoring to you your bird." She has thanked me with her eyes, and then with words also. "I am bewitched. She is divine. I care not that my feet are cold. I could wish to stand there talking all night." She has given a cry of dismay. Your hand, it is wounded." I look at my hand. "Yes, it is bleeding where the bird have bitten it." "Chut, mademoiselle, I have said it is a bagatelle." But no, she is distressed. She is what your poet Scott have said, "A ministering angel thou." She have torn her handkerchief and is binding up my wound. I am enchanted. Such beauty, such kindness, hardly can I resist to fall on my knees before her and declare my passion. We are twin souls. She has thanked me again. She has scolded the parrot. She has smiled upon me as she retires to her room. It is enough. Nothing is said, but I am a man of sensibility and discernment, and I understand that she will not be offended if I seek to renew our friendship on a more suitable occasion. The doors shut, the guests have returned to bed, the hotel servants to their duties, and I go back to my room. But not to sleep. It is very late, but I do not sleep. I lie awake, and I think of her. You will conceive, monsieur, with what mixed feelings I descend next morning. On the one hand, I must keep the sharp lookout for my uncle, for him I must avoid till I shall have, what do you say in your idiom? Oh, yes, I have it. Simmered down and tucked in his shirt. On the other hand, I must watch for my lady of the parrot. I count the minutes till we shall meet again. I avoid my uncle with success, and I see her about the hour of déjeuner. She is talking to old gentlemen. I have bowed, she has smiled, and motioned me to approach. "Father," she has said, "this is the gentleman who caught Polly." We have shaken hands. He is indulgent papa. He has smiled and thanked me also. We have confided to each other our names. He is English. He owns much land in England. He has been staying in Paris. He is rich. His name is Anderson. He addresses his daughter and calls her Marion. In my heart, I also call her Marion. You will perceive that I am, as you say, pretty far gone. The hour of déjeuner has arrived. I entreat them to be my guests. I can run to it, you understand, for there are still in my pockets plenty of my uncle's francs. They consent. I am in heaven. All is well. Our friendship has progressed with marvelous speed. The old gentleman and I are swiftly the dear old pals. I have confided to him my dreams of artistic fame, and he has told me how much he dislikes your Lloyd George. He has mentioned that he and Miss Marion depart for London that day. I am desolate. My face tumbles. He has observed my despair. He has invited me to visit them in London. Imagine my chagrin. To visit them in London is the one thing I desire to do, but how? I accept gratefully, but I ask myself how it is to be done. I am poor blighter, with no profession and 900 francs. He has taken it for granted that I am wealthy. What shall I do? I spend the afternoon trying to form a plan. And then I am resolved. I will go to my uncle and say, Uncle, I have the magnificent chance to marry the daughter of a wealthy English landowner. Already I have her gratitude soon, for I am young, handsome, debonair. I shall have her love. Given me one more chance, uncle, be decent old buck and put up the money for this affair. These words I have resolved to say to my uncle. I go back to the hotel. I enter his private office. I reveal no secret when I say that he is not cordial. 10,000 devils, he has cried. What do you have here? I hasten to tell him all and plead with him to be decent old buck. He does not believe. Who is he asks, this English landowner. How did I meet him, and where? I tell him. He is amazed. You have the infernal impudence to take room in my hotel, he has cried. I am crafty, I am diplomat. Where else, my dear uncle? I say, in all Paris there is no such homme from home. The cuisine marvelous, the beds of rose leaves, the attendants superb. If only for one night, I have said to myself, I must stay in this of all hotels. I have, what do you say, touched the spot. And what you say, he has said more calmly, there is certainly something. It is a good hotel, this of mine. The only hotel, I have assured them. The Meurice? Shit! I snap my fingers. The Ritz? Bah! Once again I snap my fingers. In all Paris there is no hotel like this. He has simmered down. His shirt is tucked in. Tell me again this plan of yours, Jean. When I leave him, we have come to an understanding. It is agreed between us that I am to have one last chance. He will not spoil this promising ship for the worth of tar. He will give me money for my purpose. But he has said as we part, if I fail, his hands shall be washed of me. He cannot now forget that I am his dear brother's child. But if I fail to accomplish the conquest of the divine Miss Marian, he thinks he will be able to. It is well. A week later I follow the Andersons to London. For the next few days, monsieur, I am in paradise. My host has much nice house in Eaton Square. He is rich, popular, there is much society, and I have the succès fou. I am young, handsome, debonair. I cannot speak English very well, not so well as I now speak him, but I manage, I get along. I am intelligent, amiable. Everyone loves me. No, not everyone. Captain Bassett, he does not love me. And why? Because he loves the charming Miss Marian, and observes that already I am succeeding with her like a house on fire. He is ami de famille. He is captain of your garde écossais, and my host told me he has distinguished himself as soldier pretty much. It may be so as soldier, perhaps, but at conversation he is not so good. He is quite nice fellow, you understand. Handsome, yes. Distinguished, oh, yes. But he does not sparkle. He is not my verve, my élan. How do you say? I make the rings around him. But, shoot! At that moment, I would have made the rings around the old British army. Yes, and also the Corps Diplomatique. For I am inspired. Love has inspired me. I am conqueror. But I will not weary you, monsieur, with the details of my wooing. You are sympathetic, but I must not weary you. Let us say that I have in 4 days or 5 made progress the most remarkable, and proceed to the tragic end. Almost I could tell it in 4 words. In them one would say that it is set forth. There was in London at that time popular song, a comic, vulgar song of the Owls, the cat came back. You have heard it? Yes, I heard it myself, and without emotion. It had no sinister warning for me. It did not strike me as an omen, yet in those 4 words, monsieur, is my tragedy. How? But I shall tell you. Every word is a sword twisted in my arm, but I shall tell you. One morning, there we were at tea. All is well. I am vivacious, gay. Miss Marian, charming, gracious. There is present also an aunt, Mr. Anderson's sister, but her I do not much notice. It is to Marian I speak, both with my lips and also with my eyes. As we sit, Captain Bassett is announced. He has entered. We have greeted each other politely but coldly, for we are rivals. There is in his manner also something which I do not much like, a species of suppressed triumph, of elation. I am uneasy, but only yet vaguely, you will understand. I have not the foreboding that he is about to speak my death sentence. He addresses Miss Marion. There is joy in his voice. Miss Anderson, he has said, I have for you the bally good news. You will remember, isn't it, the cat belonging to the American woman in the hotel at Paris, of which you have spoken to me last night at dinner? I've been seated beside her. At first I am not certain. Is it she? Then I say that there cannot be two Mrs. Balderstone rock metallers in Europe. So I mentioned to her the cat. And to cut the long story short, I ventured to purchase for you as a little present the cat Alexander. I have uttered a cry of horror, but it is not heard because of Miss Marion's cry of joy. Oh, Captain Bassett, she has said, how very splendid of you. Ever since I first saw him have I loved Alexander. I cannot tell you how grateful I am, but it amazes me that you should have been able to induce her to part with him. In Paris she has refused all my offers. He has paused, embarrassed. The fact is, he has said, there is between her and Alexander a certain coolness. He has deceived her, and she loves him no more. Immediately upon arrival in London, he had the misfortune to have 6 fine kittens. However, out of evil cometh good, and I have thus been able to secure him for you. He is downstairs in a basket. Miss Marion has rung the bell and commanded for him to be brought up instantly. I will not describe the meeting, monsieur. You are sympathetic. You will understand my feelings. Let us hurry on. Figure yourself, monsieur, to what extent I was now harassed. I am artist. I am a man of nerves. I cannot be gay, brilliant, debonair in the presence of a cat. Yet always the cat is there. It is terrible. I feel that I am falling behind in the race. Her gratitude has made her the more gracious to Captain Bassett. She smiles upon him, and like Chanticleer at the sight of the sun, he flaps his wings and crows. He is no longer the silent listener. It is I who become the silent listener. I have said to myself that something must be done. Chance has shown me the way. One afternoon I am by fortune alone in the hall. In his cage the parrot Polly is hopping. I address him through the bars. Move and I shoot, he has cried. The tears have filled my eyes. Oh, it has brought the old scene back to me. As I weep, I perceive the cat Alexander approaching. I have formed a plan. I have opened the cage door and released the parrot. The cat, I think, will attack the parrot of which Miss Anderson is so fond. She will love him no more. He will be expelled. He paused. I suppose my face must have lost some of its alleged sympathy as he set forth this fiendish plot. Even Percy the bluebottle seemed shocked. He had settled on the sugar bowl, but at these words he rose in a marked manner and left the table. You do not approve, he said. Oh, I shrugged my shoulders. No business of mine, I said, but don't you think yourself it was playing it a bit low down? Didn't the thought present itself to you in a shadowy way that it was rather rough on the bird? It did, monsieur, but what would you? It is necessary to break eggs in order to make an omelette. All is fair, you say, in love and war, and this was both. Moreover, you must understand I do not dictate his movements to the parrot. He is a free agent. I do but open the cage door. Should he hop out and proceed to the floor, where is the cat? That is his affair. I shall continue, yeah? Alors, I open the cage door and disappear discreetly. It is not politic that I remain to witness what shall transpire. It is for me to establish an alibi. I go to the drawing room where I remain. At dinner that night, Mr. Anderson has laughed. In all this afternoon, he has said, I have seen by chance the dickens of a funny occurrence. That parrot of yours, Marion, had escaped once again from his cage and was having an argument with that cat which Captain Bassett has given you. Oh, I hope that Alexander has not hurt poor Polly, of whom I am very fond, she has said. The affair did not come to blows, as said Mr. Anderson. You may trust that bird to take care of himself, my dear. When I came upon the scene, the cat was crouching in a corner with his fur bristling and his back up, while Polly, standing before him, was telling him not to move or he would shoot. Nor did he move till I had seized the parrot and replaced him in the cage, when he shot upstairs like a streak of lightning. By sheer force of character, that excellent bird had won the bloodless victory. I drink to him. You can conceive my emotion as I listen to this tale. I am like the poet's mice and men whose best kid schemes have gone away. I am baffled. I am discouraged. I do not know what I shall do. I must find another plan, but I do not know what. How shall I remove the cat? Shall I kill him? No, for I might be suspect. Shall I hire someone to steal him? No, for my accomplice might betray me. Shall I myself steal him? Ah, that is better. That is a very good plan. Soon I have it perfected, this plan. Listen, monsieur, it's as follows. It is simple, but it is good. I will await my opportunity. I will remove the cat secretly from the house. I will take him to an office of the district messenger boys. I will order a messenger to carry him at once to the cat's house, and to request Monsieur le Directeur immediately to destroy him. It is a simple plan, but it is good. I carry it through without a hitch. It is not so difficult to secure the cat. He is asleep in the drawing room. There is nobody at hand. I have in my bedroom a hat box, which I have brought from Paris. I have brought it with me to the drawing room. I have placed in it the cat. I have escaped from the house. The cat has uttered a cry, but none has heard. I have reached the office of the district messenger boys. I have handed over the cat in its box. The manager is courteous, sympathetic. A messenger has started in a cab for the cat's house. I have breathed a sigh of relief. I am saved. That is what I say to myself as I return. My troubles are over, and once more I can be gay, debonair, vivacious with Miss Marian, for no longer will there be present with a cat Alexander to harass me. When I have returned, there is commotion in the house. I pass on the stairs, domestics calling, "Puss, puss, puss." The butler is chirruping loudly and poking beneath the furniture with an umbrella. All is confusion and agitation. In the drawing room is Miss Marian. She is distressed. "Nowhere," she has said, "can there be found the cat Alexander of whom I am so fond. Nowhere in the house is he. Where can he be? He is lost." I am gentle, sympathetic. I endeavor to console her. I hint to her that I am not sufficient substitute for a beastly cat. She is, however, inconsolable. I must be patient. I must wait my time. Captain Bassett is announced. He is informed of what has happened. He is distressed. He has the air as if he too would endeavor to be gentle, sympathetic. But I am Johnny on the spot. I stay till he has gone. Next day again it is puss, puss, puss. Again the butler has explored under the furniture with the umbrella. Again Miss Marian is distressed. Again have I endeavored to console. This time I think I am not so unsuccessful. I am, you understand, young, handsome, sympathetic. In another 2 ticks I am about to seize her and declare my passion. But before I can do so, Captain Bassett is announced. I gaze at him as at unsuccessful rival. I am confident, I am conqueror. Ah, I little know. It is in the moments of our highest hope, monsieur, that we are destroyed. Captain Bassett, he too, has the air of the conqueror. He has begun to speak. "Miss Anderson," he has said, "I have once more the bally good news. I rather fancy that I have tracked down the missing Alexander. Do you not know him?" Miss Marian has cried out with joy, but I am calm, for is not Alexander already yesterday destroyed? "It is like this," he has resumed. "I have thought to myself, where is lost cat most likely to be? And I have answered, in the cat's house. So I go this morning to the cat's house, and there I see a cat which is either lost Alexander or his living image. Exactly is he the same as all appearances as the lost Alexander. But there is, when I try to purchase him, some curious itch which they do not explain. They must have time, they say, to consider. They cannot at once decide." "Why, what nonsense!" Miss Marian has cried. "If the cat is my cat, surely then must they return him to me? Come," he has said, "let us all 3 at once, in a taxicab, go to the cat's house. If the all 3 of us identify the lost Alexander, then must they return him?" "Monsieur, I am uneasy. I have foreboding, but I go. What choice? We go in a taxicab to the cat's house. The directeur is courteous and sympathetic. He has introduced us to the cat, and my heart has turned to water, for it is Alexander. Why has he not been destroyed? The directeur is speaking. I hear him in a dream. "If you identify him as your cat, miss," he has said, "the matter is ended. My hesitation when you, sir, approached me this morning on the matter was due to the fact that a messenger was sent with instructions that he be destroyed at once." "Rather rough, wasn't it, that on the messenger?" "Yes," Captain Bassett has said. He is facetious, you understand, for he is conqueror. I am silent. I am not facetious, for already I feel, how do you say, my fowl is cooked. "Oh, not the messenger, sir," the director has said. "You have misunderstood me. It was the cat which was to be destroyed as per instructions of the anonymous sender." "Who could have played such a wicked trick?" Miss Marian has asked, indignant. The director has stooped, and from behind the table he has brought a hat box. In this, he has said, the above animal was conveyed, but with it was no accompanying letter. The sender was anonymous. "Perhaps, Captain Bassett," he said, and still more in a dream I hear him, "perhaps on the hat box is some bally name or other. Do you not know? No, what?" I clutched at the table. The room is spinning round and round. I have no stomach, only emptiness. "Why, bless me," the director said. "You're quite right." "Yes, sir." "So there is. Funny of me not to have before observed it. There is a name and also an address. It is the name of Jean Préau, and the address is the Hotel Jules Préau in Paris." My companion stopped abruptly. He passed a handkerchief over his forehead. With a quick movement he reached for his glass of liqueur brandy and drained it at a gulp. "Monsieur," he said, "you will not wish me to describe the scene? There is no need for me, to be Zola-esque. You can imagine?" She chucked you in a moment of emotion. It is the simplest language that comes to the lips. He nodded. "And married Captain Bassett?" He nodded again. "And your uncle?" I said. "How did he take it?" He sighed. "There was once more a blooming row, monsieur." "He washed his hands of you?" "Well, not altogether. He was angry, but he gave me one more chance. I am still his dear brother's child, and he cannot forget it. An acquaintance of his, a man of letters, a Monsieur Paul Sartine, was in need of a secretary. The post was not well paid, but it was permanent. My uncle insists that I take it. What choice? I took it. It is the post which I still hold." He ordered another liqueur brandy and gulped it down. "The name is familiar to you? You have heard of Monsieur Sartines?" "No, I don't think I have. Who is he?" "He is a man of letters, a savant. For 5 years he has been occupied upon a great work. It is with that I assist him by collecting facts for his use. I've spent this afternoon in the British Museum collecting facts. Tomorrow I go again, and the next day, and again after that. The book will occupy yet another 10 years before it is completed. It is his great work." "It sounds as if it was," I said. "What's it about?" He signaled to the waiter. "Garçon, one other liqueur brandy." "The book, monsieur, is a history of the cat in ancient Egypt." End of Chapter 7, The Man Who Disliked Cats. Recording by Mike Harris. Chapter 8 of The Man Upstairs. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Mike Harris. The Man Upstairs by P.G.Wodehouse. Story number 8, Ruth in Exile. The clock struck 5, briskly, as if time were money. Ruth Warden got up from her desk and, having put on her hat, emerged into the outer office where Monsieur Gandinot received visitors. Monsieur Gandinot, the ugliest man in Roville-sur-Mer, presided over the local Mont de Piété, and Ruth served him from 10 to 5 as a sort of secretary clerk. Her duties, if monotonous, were simple. They consisted of sitting, detached and invisible, behind a ground-glass screen, and entering details of loans in a fat book. She was kept busy as a rule, for Roville possesses 2 casinos, each offering the attraction of Petits Chevaux, and just around the corner is Monte Carlo. Very brisk was the business done by Monsieur Gandinot, the pawnbroker, and very frequent were the pitying shakes of the head and clicks of the tongue of Monsieur Gandinot, the man. For in his unofficial capacity, Ruth's employer had a gentle soul, and winced at the evidences of tragedy which presented themselves before his official eyes. He blinked up at Ruth as she appeared, and Ruth, as she looked at him, was conscious as usual of a lightening of the depression, which nowadays seemed to have settled permanently upon her. The peculiar quality of Monsieur Gandinot's extraordinary countenance was that it induced mirth, not mocking laughter, but a kind of smiling happiness. It possessed that indefinable quality which characterizes the Billiken, due perhaps to the unquenchable optimism which shone through the irregular features. For Monsieur Gandinot, despite his calling, believed in his fellow man. "You are going, mademoiselle?" As Ruth was wearing her hat and making for the door, and as she always left at this hour, a purist might have considered the question superfluous, but Monsieur Gandinot was a man who seized every opportunity of practicing his English. "You will not wait for the good papa who calls so regularly for you?" I think I won't today, Monsieur Gandinot. I want to get out into the air. I have rather a headache. Will you tell my father that I've gone to the promenade? Monsieur Gandinot sighed as the door closed behind her. Ruth's depression had not escaped his notice. He was sorry for her, and not without cause, for fate had not dealt too kindly with Ruth. It would have amazed Mr. Eugene Warden, that genial old gentleman, if, on one of those occasions of manly emotion when he was in the habit of observing that he had been nobody's enemy but his own, somebody had hinted that he had spoiled his daughter's life. Such a thought had never entered his head. He was one of those delightful, irresponsible, erratic persons into whose heads thoughts of this kind do not enter, and who are about as deadly to those whose lives are bound up with theirs as an upas tree. In the memory of his oldest acquaintance, Ruth's father had never done anything but drift amiably through life. There had been a time when he had done his drifting in London, feeding cheerfully from the hand of a long-suffering brother-in-law. But though blood, as he was wont to remark while negotiating his periodical loans, is thicker than water, a brother-in-law's affection has its limits. A day came when Mr. Warden observed with pain that his relative responded less nimbly to the touch, and a little while later the other delivered his ultimatum. Mr. Warden was to leave England and to stay away from England, to behave as if England no longer existed on the map, and a small but sufficient allowance would be made to him. If he declined to do this, not another penny of the speaker's money would he receive. He could choose, and he chose. He left England, Ruth with him. They settled in Roville, that haven of the exile who lives upon remittances. Ruth's connection with the Mont-de-Piété had come about almost automatically. Very soon after their arrival, it became evident that, to a man of Mr. Warden's nature, resident a stone's throw distant from two casinos, the small allowance was not likely to go very far. Even if Ruth had not wished to work, circumstances would have compelled her. As it was, she longed for something to occupy her, and the vacancy at the Mont-de-Piété occurring, she had snatched at it. There was a certain fitness in her working there. Business transactions with that useful institution had always been conducted by her, it being Mr. Warden's theory that woman can extract in these crises just that extra franc or two which is denied to the mere male. Through constantly going round, running across, stepping over, and popping down to the Mont-de-Piété, she had established almost a legal claim on any post that might be vacant there. And under Monsieur Gandinot's banner, she had served ever since. 5 minutes' walk took her to the Promenade des Anglais, that apparently endless thoroughfare which is Roville's pride. The evening was fine and warm. The sun shone gaily on the white-walled houses, the bright gardens, and the two gleaming casinos. But Ruth walked listlessly, blinded to the glitter of it all. Visitors who go to Roville for a few weeks in the winter are apt to speak of the place on their return in a manner that conveys the impression that it's a paradise on earth, with gambling facilities thrown in, but then they are visitors. Their sojourn comes to an end. Ruth's did not. A voice spoke to her name. She turned and saw her father, dapper as ever, standing beside her. "What an evening, my dear," said Mr. Warden. "What an evening! Smell of the sea." Mr. Warden appeared to be in high spirits. He hummed a tune and twirled his cane. He chirruped frequently to Bill, the companion of his walks abroad, a wiry fox terrier of a demeanour, like his master's, both jaunty and slightly disreputable. An air of gaiety pervaded his bearing. "I called in at the Mont-de-Piété, but you had gone. Gandinot told me you'd come here. What an ugly fellow that Gandinot is, but a good sort. I like him. I had a chat with him." The high spirits were explained. Ruth knew her father. She guessed correctly that Monsieur Gandinot, kindest of pawnbrokers, had obliged in his unofficial capacity with a trifling loan. "Gandinot ought to go on the stage," went on Mr. Warden, pursuing his theme. "With that face he'd make his fortune. You can't help laughing when you see it. Now one of these days But he broke off. Stirring things had begun to occur in the neighborhood of his ankles, where Bill the fox terrier had encountered an acquaintance and, to the accompaniment of a loud gargling noise, was endeavoring to bite his head off. This acquaintance, a gentleman of uncertain breed, equally winning, was chewing Bill's paw with the gusto of a gourmet. An Irish terrier with no personal bias towards either side was dancing round and attacking each in turn as he came uppermost. Oh, and 2 poodles leaped madly in and out of the melee, barking encouragement. It takes a better man than Mr. Warden to break up a gathering of this kind. The old gentleman was bewildered. He added his voice to the babble, and twice smote Bill grievously with his cane, with blows intended for the acquaintance, but beyond that he effected nothing. It seemed probable that the engagement would last till the combatants had consumed each other, after the fashion of the Kilkenny cats, when there suddenly appeared from nowhere a young man in grey. The world is divided into those who can stop dogfights and those who cannot. The young man in grey belonged to the former class. Within a minute from his entrance on the scene, the poodles and the Irish terrier had vanished. The dog of doubtful breed was moving off up the hill, yelping, with the dispatch of one who remembers an important appointment, and Bill, miraculously calmed, was seated in the center of the promenade, licking honorable wounds. Mr. Warden was disposed to effervesce with gratitude. The scene had shaken him, and there had been moments when he had given his ankles up for lost. Don't mention it, said the young man. I enjoy arbitrating in these little disputes. Dogs seem to like me and trust my judgment. I consider myself as a sort of honorary dog. Well, I'm bound to say, Mr. Vince, George Vince. My name is Warden, my daughter. Ruth inclined her head and was conscious of a pair of very penetrating brown eyes looking eagerly into hers in a manner which she thoroughly resented. She was not used to the other sex meeting her gaze and holding it as if confident of a friendly welcome. She made up her mind in that instant that this was a young man who required suppression. I've seen you several times out here since I arrived, Miss Warden, said Mr. Vince. 4 in all, he added precisely. Really? Said Ruth. She looked away. Her attitude seemed to suggest that she had finished with him and would be obliged if somebody would come and sweep him up. As they approached the casino, restlessness crept into Mr. Warden's manner. At the door he stopped and looked at Ruth up. I think, my dear, he said. Going to have a dash at the Petit Chevaux? Inquired Mr. Vince. I was there just now. I have an infallible system. Mr. Warden started like a warhorse at the sound of the trumpet. Only it's infallible in the wrong way, went on the young man. Well, I wish you luck. I'll see Miss Warden home. Oh, please don't trouble, said Ruth in the haughty manner which had frequently witted unfortunate fellow exiles in their tracks. It had no such effect on Mr. Vince. Oh, I shall like it, he said. Ruth set her teeth. She would see whether he would like it. They left Mr. Warden, who shot in at the casino door like a homing rabbit, and walked on in silence, which lasted till Ruth, suddenly becoming aware that her companion's eye was fixed on her face, turned her head to meet a gaze of complete, not to say loving, admiration. She flushed. She was accustomed to being looked at admiringly, but about this particular look there was a subtle quality that distinguished it from the ordinary, something proprietorial. Mr. Vince appeared to be a young man who wasted no time on conventional conversation openings. Do you believe in affinities, Miss Warden? He said. No, said Ruth. You will before we're done, said Mr. Vince confidently. Why did you try to snub me just now? Oh, did I? Oh, you mustn't again. It hurts me. I'm a sensitive man, diffident and shy. Miss Warden, will you marry me? Ruth had determined that nothing should shake her from her icy detachment, but this did. She stopped with a gasp and stared at him. Mr. Vince reassured her. Oh, I don't expect you to say yes. That was just a beginning, sort of the shot fired across the bow by way of warning. In you, Miss Warden, I have found my affinity. Have you ever considered this matter of affinities? Affinities are the wait a moment. He paused, reflecting. I, began Ruth. Shh, said the young man, holding up his hand. Ruth's eyes flashed. She was not used to having shh said to her by a young man, and she resented it. Oh, I've got it, he declared with relief. I knew I should, but these good things take time. Affinities are the zero on the roulette board of life. Just as we select a number on which to stake our money, so do we select a type of girl whom we think we should like to marry. And just as zero pops up instead of the number, so does our affinity come along and upset all our preconceived notions of the type of girl we should like to marry. Began Ruth again. The analogy is in the rough at present. I haven't had time to condense and polish it, but you see the idea. Take my case, for instance. When I saw you a couple of days ago, I knew in an instant that you were my affinity. But for years, I'd been looking for a woman almost your exact opposite. You were dark. 3 days ago, I couldn't have imagined myself marrying anyone who was not fair. Your eyes are gray. 3 days ago, my preference for blue eyes was a byword. You have a shocking temper. 3 days ago, Mr. Vince! There, said that philosopher complacently, you stamped. The gentle, blue-eyed blonde whom I was looking for 3 days ago would have drooped timidly. 3 days ago, my passion for timid droopers amounted to an obsession. Ruth did not reply. It was useless to bandy words with one who gave such clear evidence of being something out of the common run of word bandiers. No verbal attack could crush this extraordinary young man. She walked on, all silence and stony profile, uncomfortably conscious that her companion was in no way abashed by the former, and was regarding the latter with that frank admiration which made itself so obnoxious to her before, until they reached their destination. Mr. Vince, meanwhile, chatted cheerfully and pointed out objects of interest by the wayside. At the door, Ruth permitted herself a word of farewell. "Goodbye," she said. "Till tomorrow evening," said Mr. Vince. "I shall be coming to dinner." Mr. Warden ambled home very happy and contented 2 hours later, with half a franc in his pocket, this comparative wealth being due to the fact that the minimum stake permitted by the Rouville Casino is just double that sum. He was sorry not to have won, but his mind was too full of rosy dreams to permit of remorse. It was the estimable old gentleman's dearest wish that his daughter should marry some rich, open-handed man who would keep him in affluence for the remainder of his days, and to that end he was in the habit of introducing to her notice any such that came his way. There was no question of coercing Ruth. He was too tender-hearted for that. Besides, he couldn't. Ruth was not the sort of girl who is readily coerced. He contented himself with giving her the opportunity to inspect his exhibits. Rouville is a sociable place, and it was not unusual for him to make friends at the casino and to bring them home, when made, for a cigar. Up to the present, he was bound to admit his efforts had not been particularly successful. Ruth, he reflected sadly, was a curious girl. She did not show her best side to these visitors. There was no encouragement in her manner. She was apt to frighten the unfortunate exhibits. But of this young man, Vince had brighter hopes. He was rich. That was proved by the very handsome way in which he had behaved in the manner of a small loan when, looking in at the casino after parting from Ruth, he had found Mr. Warden in sore straits for want of a little capital to back a brand-new system which he had conceived through closely observing the run of the play. He was also obviously attracted by Ruth, and as he was remarkably presentable, indeed quite an unusually good-looking young man, there seemed no reason why Ruth should not be equally attracted by him. The world looked good to Mr. Warden as he fell asleep that night. Ruth, on the other hand, did not fall asleep so easily. The episode had disturbed her. A new element had entered her life, and one that gave promise of producing strange byproducts. When on the following evening Ruth returned from the stroll on the promenade, which she always took after leaving the Mont-Piété, with a feeling of irritation towards things in general, this feeling was not diminished by the sight of Mr. Vince, very much at his ease, standing against the mantelpiece of the tiny parlor. "How do you do?" he said. "By an extraordinary coincidence, I happened to be hanging about outside this house just now, when your father came along and invited me in to dinner. Have you ever thought much about coincidences, Miss Warden? To my mind, they may be described as the zero on the roulette board of life." He regarded her fondly. For a shy man, conscious that the girl he loves is inspecting him closely and making up her mind about him, he proceeded, "These unexpected meetings are very trying ordeals. You must not form your judgment of me too hastily. You see me now, nervous, embarrassed, tongue-tied, but I'm not always like this. Beneath this crust of diffidence there is sterling stuff, Miss Warden. People who know me have spoken of me as a little ray of sun. But here is your father." Mr. Warden was more than usually disappointed with Ruth during dinner. It was the same old story. So far from making herself pleasant to this attractive stranger, she seemed positively to dislike him. She was barely civil to him. With a sigh, Mr. Warden told himself that he did not understand Ruth, and the rosy dreams he had formed began to fade. Ruth's ideas on the subject of Mr. Vince as the days went by were chaotic. Though she told herself that she thoroughly objected to him, he had nevertheless begun to have an undeniable attraction for her. In what this attraction consisted of, she could not say. When she tried to analyze it, she came to the conclusion that it was due to the fact that he was the only element in her life that made for excitement. Since his advent, the days had certainly passed more swiftly for her. The dead level of monotony had been broken. There was a certain fascination in exerting herself to suppress him, which increased daily as each attempt failed. Mr. Vince put his feelings into words for her. He had a maddening habit of discussing the progress of his courtship in the manner of an impartial lecturer. "I'm making headway," he observed. "The fact that we cannot meet without your endeavoring to plant a temperamental left jab on my spiritual solar plexus encourages me to think that you're beginning at last to understand that we are affinities. To persons of spirit like ourselves, the only happy marriage is that which is based on a firm foundation of almost incessant quarreling. The most beautiful line in English poetry, to my mind, is, 'We fell out, my wife and I.' You'd be wretched without a husband who didn't like you to quarrel with him. The position of affairs now is that I have become necessary to you. If I went out of your life now, I should leave an aching void. You would still have that beautiful punch of yours, and there would be nobody to exercise it on. You would pine away. From now on, matters should, I think, move rapidly. During the course of the next week, I shall endeavor to propitiate you with gifts. Here is the first of them." He took a piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to her. It was a pencil sketch, rough and unfinished, but wonderfully clever. Even Ruth could appreciate that, and she was a prejudiced observer, for the sketch was a caricature of herself. It represented her drawn up to her full height with enormous, scornful eyes and curling lips, and the artist had managed to combine an excellent likeness while accentuating everything that was marked in what she knew had come to be her normal expression of scorn and disconnect. "I didn't know you were an artist, Mr. Vince," she said, handing it back. "A poor amateur, nothing more. You may keep it." "I have not the slightest wish to keep it." "You haven't?" "It's not in the least clever, and it is very impertinent of you to show it to me. The drawing is not funny, it is simply rude." "A little more," said Mr. Vince, "and I shall begin to think you don't like it. Are you fond of chocolates?" Ruth did not answer. "I am sending you some tomorrow." "I shall return them." "Then I shall send some more and some fruit." "Gifts," soliloquized Mr. Vince. "Gifts. That is the secret. Keep sending gifts. If men would only stick to gifts and quarreling, there would be fewer bachelors." On the morrow, as promised, the chocolates arrived, many pounds of them, in a lordly box. The bludgeoning of fate had not wholly scotched in Ruth a human weakness for sweets, and it was with a distinct effort that she wrapped the box up again and returned it to the sender. She went off to her work at the Mont de Piété with a glow of satisfaction which comes to those who exhibit an iron will in trying circumstances, and at the Mont de Piété there occurred a surprising incident. Surprising incidents, as Mr. Vince would have said, are the zero on the roulette board of life. They pop up disturbingly when least expected, confusing the mind and altering preconceived opinions. And this was a very surprising incident indeed. Ruth, as has been stated, sat during her hours of work behind a ground glass screen, unseen and unseeing. To her, the patrons of the establishment were mere disembodied voices, wheedling voices, pathetic voices, voices that protested, voices that hectored, voices that whined, moaned, broke, appealed to the saints, and in various other ways endeavored to instill into Monsieur Grandinot more spacious and princely views on the subject, advancing money on property pledged. She was sitting behind her screen this morning, scribbling idly on the blotting pad, for there had been a lull in the business, when the door opened and the polite "Bonjour, monsieur," of Monsieur Grandinot announced the arrival of another unfortunate. And then, shaking her like an electric shock, came a voice that she knew, the pleasant voice of Mr. Vince. The dialogues that took place on the other side of the screen were often protracted and always sordid, but none had seemed to Ruth so interminable, so hideously sordid as this one. Round and round its miserable center, a silver cigarette case. The dreary argument circled. The young men pleaded. Monsieur Grandinot, adamant in his official role, was immovable. Ruth could bear it no longer. She pressed her hands over her burning ears, and the voices ceased to trouble her. And with the silence came thought, and a blaze of understanding that flashed upon her and made all things clear. She understood now why she had closed her ears. Poverty is an acid which reacts differently on differing natures. It had reduced Mr. Eugene Warden's self-respect to a minimum. Ruth's it had reared up to an abnormal growth. Her pride had become a weed that ran riot in her soul, darkening it and choking finer emotions. Perhaps it was her father's naive stratagems for the enmeshing of a wealthy husband that had produced in her at last a morbid antipathy to the idea of playing beggar-maid to any man's King Cophetua. The state of mind is intelligible. The Cophetua legend never has been told from the beggar-maid's point of view, and there must have been moments when, if a woman of spirit, she resented that monarch's somewhat condescending attitude, and felt that, secure in his wealth and magnificence, he had taken her grateful acquiescence very much for granted. This, she saw now, was what had prejudiced her against George Vince. She had assumed that he was rich. He had conveyed the impression of being rich, and she had been on the defensive against him accordingly. Now, for the first time, she seemed to know him. A barrier had been broken down. The royal robes had proved tinsel and no longer disguised the man she loved. A touch on her arm aroused her. Monsieur Grandineau was standing by her side. Terms, apparently, had been agreed upon, and the interview concluded, for in his hand was a silver cigarette case. "Dreaming, mademoiselle? I could not make you hear. The more I called you, the more you did not answer. It is necessary to enter this loan." He recited the details, and Ruth entered them in her ledger. This done, Monsieur Grandineau, doffing his official self, sighed. It is a place of much sorrow, mademoiselle, this office. How he would not take no for an answer, that young man recently departed. A fellow countryman of yours, mademoiselle, you would say. What does this young man, so well dressed in a mont-de-piété? But I know better. Gandino, you have an expression, you English. I heard it in Paris in a cafe and inquired of its meaning. When you say of a man that he swanks, how many young men have I seen here admirably dressed, rich, you would say. No. The mont-de-piété permits no secrets. To swank, mademoiselle, what is it? To deceive the world, yes, but not the mont-de-piété. Yesterday also, when you had departed, was he here, that young man? Yet here he is once more today. He spends his money quickly, alas, that poor young swanker. When Ruth returned home that evening, she found her father in the sitting room smoking a cigarette. He greeted her with effusion, but with some uneasiness. For the old gentleman had nerved himself to a delicate task. He had made up his mind tonight to speak seriously to Ruth on the subject of her unsatisfactory behavior to Mr. Vince. The more he saw that young man, the more positive was he that this was the human gold mine for which he had been searching all these weary years. Accordingly, he threw away his cigarette, kissed Ruth on the forehead, and began to speak. It had long been Mr. Warden's opinion that if his daughter had a fault, it was a tendency toward a quite unnecessary and highly inconvenient frankness. She would not evade, ignore, agree not to see. She was at times painfully blunt. This happened now. He was warming to his subject when she interrupted him with a question. "What makes you think Mr. Vince is rich, Father?" Mr. Warden was embarrassed. The subject of Mr. Vince's opulence had not entered into his discourse. He had carefully avoided it. The fact that he was thinking of it, and that Ruth knew that he was thinking of it, and that he knew that Ruth knew, had nothing to do with the case. The question was not in order, and it embarrassed him. I never said he was rich, madame. I have no doubt that he has ample. He is quite poor. Mr. Warden's jaw fell slightly. Poor? But my dear, that's absurd, he cried. Why, only this evening. He broke off abruptly, but it was too late. Father, you've been borrowing money from him. Mr. Warden drew in his breath, preparatory to an indignant denial, but he altered his mind and remained silent. As a borrower of money, he had every quality but one. He had come to look on her perspicacity in this matter as a sort of second sight. It had frequently gone far to spoiling for him the triumph of success. "And he has to pawn things to live," her voice was trembling. "He was at the Mont-de-Piété today, and yesterday, too. I heard him. He was arguing with Monsieur Gandino, haggling." Her voice broke. She was sobbing helplessly. The memory of it was too raw and vivid. Mr. Warden stood motionless. Many emotions raced through his mind, but chief among them the thought that this revelation had come at a very fortunate time. An exceedingly lucky escape, he felt. He was aware also of a certain measure of indignation against this deceitful young man, who had fraudulently imitated a gold mine with what might have been disastrous results. The door opened, and Jean, the maid of all work, announced Mr. Vince. He entered the room briskly. "Good evening," he said. "I have brought you some more chocolates, Miss Warden, and some fruit." "Great Scott, what's the matter?" He stopped, but only for an instant. The next he had darted across the room, and before the horrified eyes of Mr. Warden, was holding Ruth in his arms. She clung to him. Bill, the fox terrier, over whom Mr. Vince had happened to stumble, was the first to speak. Almost simultaneously, Mr. Warden joined in, and there was a striking similarity between the two voices. For Mr. Warden, searching for words, emitted as a preliminary to them a sort of passionate yelp. Mr. Vince removed the hand that was patting Ruth's shoulder and waved it reassuringly at him. "It's all right," he said. "All right, all right." "Affinities," explained Mr. Vince over his shoulder. "Two hearts that beat as one. We're going to be married." "What's the matter, dear? Don't you worry. You're all right." "I refuse," shouted Mr. Warden. "I absolutely refuse." Mr. Vince lowered Ruth gently into a chair and, holding her hand, inspected the fermenting old gentleman gravely. "You refuse," he said. "Why, I thought you liked me." Mr. Warden's frenzy had cooled. It had been something foreign to his nature. He regretted it. These things had to be managed with restraint. "My personal likes and dislikes," he said, "have nothing to do with the matter, Mr. Vince. They are beside the point. I have my daughter to consider. I cannot allow her to marry a man without a penny." "Oh, quite right," said Mr. Vince approvingly. "Don't have anything to do with the fellow. If he tries to butt in, send for the police." Mr. Warden hesitated. He had always been a little ashamed of Ruth's occupation, but necessity compelled. "Mr. Vince, my daughter is employed at the Mont de Piété, and was a witness to all that took place this afternoon." Mr. Vince was genuinely agitated. He looked at Ruth, his face full of concern. "You don't mean to say that you've been slaving away in that stuffy—" "Great Scott! I'll have you out of that quick. You mustn't go there again." He stooped and kissed her. "Perhaps you'd better let me explain," he said. "Explanations, I always think, are the zero on the roulette board of life. They're always somewhere about, waiting to pop up. Have you ever heard of Vince's Stores, Mr. Warden? Perhaps they are since your time. Well, my father is the proprietor. One of our specialties is children's toys. But we haven't picked a real winner for years, and my father, when I last saw him, seemed so distressed about it that I said I'd see if I couldn't whack out an idea or something. Well, something on the lines of the Billiken, only better, was what he felt he needed. I'm not used to brain work, and after a spell of it I felt I wanted a rest. I came here to recuperate, and the very first morning I got an inspiration. You may have noticed that the manager of the Mont de Piété here isn't strong on conventional good looks. I saw him at the casino, and the thing flashed on me. He thinks his name's Gandino, but it isn't. It's Uncle Zip, the hump curer, the man who makes you smile." He pressed Ruth's hand affectionately. "I lost track of him, and it was only the day before yesterday that I discovered who he was and where he was to be found. Well, you can't go up to a man and ask him to pose as a model for Uncle Zip, the hump curer. The only way to get sittings was to approach him in the way of business. So I collected what property I had and waded in. Now, that's the whole story. Do I pass?" Mr. Warden's frosty demeanour had gradually thawed during this recital, and now the sun of his smile shone out warmly. He gripped Mr. Vince's hand with every evidence of esteem, and after that he did what was certainly the best thing by passing gently from the room. On his face, as he went, was a look such as Moses might have worn on the summit of Mount Pisgah. It was some 20 minutes later that Ruth made a remark. "I want you to promise me something," she said. "Promise that you won't go on with that Uncle Zip drawing. I know it means ever so much money, but it might hurt poor Mr. Gandino's feelings, and he's been very kind to me." "That settles it," said Mr. Vince. "It's hard on the children of Great Britain, but say no more. No Uncle Zip for them." Ruth looked at him almost with awe. "You really won't go on with it, in spite of all the money you'd make? Are you always going to do just what I ask you, no matter what it costs you?" He nodded sadly. "You have sketched out in a few words the whole policy of my married life. I feel an awful fraud. and I had encouraged you to look forward to years of incessant quarrelling. Do you think you can manage without it? I'm afraid it's going to be shockingly dull for you," said Mr. Vince, regretfully. End of story number 8, Ruth in Exile. Recording by Mike Harris.